All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Evernest Real Estate Investor Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Spencer Sutton, and today I'm actually flying solo on the podcast. We have Matthew, who's not with us. Gray Hall is not with us. Gray's actually flying back to Denver. He's been in Birmingham, but I'm really excited because I do have a guest with me. I have one of my colleagues who is living in Little Rock, Arkansas right now, Miss Erin Dreyer. Erin, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited about being here.
Well, I'm glad you are, because when I was thinking about, what are some markets that we haven't really spent a lot of time going into and talking about that we're still that we see a lot of investor interest in. Little Rock is one of those cities that investors are finding. I mean, they're able to find deals. They're very, very interested in it. And we know a lot of investors who've been working with you over the years. So we thought, man, Erin, you would be perfect to have on this show because you've got tons of experience. Now, I've got a connection to that area that I was going to share. Did you know, Erin, that I was born in Jacksonville, Arkansas?
No, you never told me that. That is where I grew up.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah.
Were you Air Force?
Yeah, my dad was in the Air Force. He was a physician in the Air Force. I was born at the Air Force base. And then we moved when I was probably 1 year old. We moved to Denver and then moved to Birmingham probably when I was 2. So I've been here ever since.
You've never told me that. I wish you would have told me that.
Yeah, so very cool connection. And then my brother graduated from Harding University, which is in Searcy, Arkansas, not far from there. I've got a niece there right now. She's finishing up school. And then also my wife's sister lives in Little Rock. So my family has a pretty big connection there in Little Rock.
Spencer, you never told me that you're an Arkie.
I know, I am an Arkie, I guess. And let me tell you, this is a sad but funny story. Is when I went to fill out my first passport. So I was going on a mission trip. I was going to go to Ukraine. Actually, it was 2006. I went to the post office to fill out all this application, and place of birth is on your passport. And so I put in Jacksonville, and what I thought were the initials or the abbreviation for Arkansas, but I put AK, which is Alaska. Yeah. So
we do AK or Arizona.
Well, I got my passport and it literally says Alaska, USA. And so, because it doesn't abbreviate. And so I was like, well, I didn't have time to change it, to go through all because my trip was coming up. So literally I have been overseas so many times. And when I come back into the country, sometimes they'll look at it and they'll say, Alaska, huh? They'll be like, I've never met anybody from Alaska before. And I was like, yeah, okay. Yeah. So anyway,
I didn't know I was from there either.
It should be AR. AR is the abbreviation for Arkansas. I've never forgotten that since 2006. So, but it's great to have you on the show. Erin, you've been with us a while. You've been in the business longer than you've been with us. So I'd love for our listeners to just hear a little bit about your background and how you got into this crazy property management business before we kind of dive into Little Rock.
Well, okay. Well, I started out, let's see. I worked for, our broker that works for Evernest now in Little Rock had a company, and she asked me to paint a house for her. And so I was like, well, okay, I'll paint it. Not having any idea how property management works or runs. I was like, sure, I'll paint your house. I was like, I'll take my time, 3 months. It took me 3 months to paint her house. But apparently I did good enough. She said, will you paint another one for me? I was like, yeah. And she's like, hey, and can we keep it on a schedule? And I was like, oh, okay. Well, you didn't say anything about schedule.
Yeah, not 3 months.
So,
okay.
Yeah. That's like the last thing you want in property management is for someone to take 3 months to paint your house.
Correct.
Worked on another house for her. And then at that time, I think her husband was going to take an early retirement out of the business. And she asked me to come in and do her inspections. So I started doing some inspections. It's the role we call is a PMT now. Mm-hmm. But so I did move-in inspections, move-out inspections. probably one of the best things I've ever did was to do that for so long, because I really learned like that, what a property manager needs from that person. But I worked for her doing that for about 8 years. And then she pulled me into the office and said, I want you to come in and work in the office. And I was like, I don't want to work in the office. I don't want to call owners. I don't want to do all that. It was so stressful when I did it. But once I learned how to do that, it really kind of set me up for the day when like gkhouses came in. So Evernest, but before Evernest, gkhouses, they come in and they buy our company in 2018. And I am floored. I didn't even know it was coming. And there's always a funny story with like Matthew and all the people that were actually there, because they were like, this chick is not staying around. She's not gonna stick around at all. She's leaving. And I really thought at the time on mine, I was like, I don't even know what's going on. So we restructured everything, and it turned into just me and one other person in Little Rock.
Yep.
Didn't have that many houses. We had a huge office though.
Yeah.
I don't know
if probably you around that. I think so just for the listeners who are hearing this, GK Houses was our old name, our old brand. We had we rebranded the entire company in 2020, at the end of 2020, to Evernest, which is what you know now. So when we purchased this property management company in Little Rock in 2018, Erin was working there. And Matthew was like, I don't know if she's going to stick around, but you did stick around. And we were only managing like 200 properties at the time. Like, it was a very small portfolio.
Yeah.
And
stuck
then
around.
Yeah, you stuck around. Yeah. Keep going.
And watch how things went. I mean, that was real important to me, because like the company wasn't that big at that point. Like we were only in a couple of markets. I mean, looking back now, it's like, wow, look where we've gone, but at the time it just wasn't that big. And I didn't really know, was very unsure. And then, oops.
We can cut that out.
Okay. And then so we had a couple other people come into the office, and I really at that point was like, you know what, I'm ready to just do this. So I became the team leader, and then didn't really know, our market was still so small that I could handle sales. So and I remember my first sales call, that was a nightmare, because the first one I went out on, the lady said, why did they send you? You don't know any of the answers. And I was like, but you know what? I will next time someone asks me. I'll know those answers next time somebody asks me. But anyways, I handled sales, and one of my biggest things there was to grow that market. It was so much fun to grow it. And so now it's at about 600 with our institutional investors, and about 400 without them.
Yeah. So it was really, really interesting. We moved into that market. Erin, you started to flourish. We probably had you go on sales calls because we didn't have anybody else to do it. And we're like, hey, if somebody knows the market, it's going to be Erin. Like, we're not going to know from Birmingham. So you just kind of, that's the way we did things back in the day. We just kind of threw people in positions, and they learned on the fly. And you learned really, really well, because what happened was you just started signing up owners. Like, people would call. We have a ton of out-of-state investors that started calling and had a lot of interest in Little Rock, and you just started helping them, figuring out the answers. The market really, really well. And the market grew and grew and grew and grew. And, to Erin's credit, she doubled the size of the market. And that happens not when you just have a good salesperson, but you have good operations on the background, right? So on the back end of that. So we're able to execute. And because we were able to execute, we also have some institutional investors who are buying in Little Rock. So now it's a really thriving market for us. And I'm excited to have you here, because I know people are always looking for, hey, some different markets to invest in, potentially to diversify. Maybe if they're in Atlanta, they're investing in Atlanta or Nashville or Denver. Maybe they want to diversify and have some of these smaller tertiary markets like a Birmingham, a Little Rock, a Chattanooga, something like that. So I'm excited. So tell me, Erin, let's kind of turn our focus and attention on the investors. Why do investors like Little Rock?
It would be 100% the price point you can enter the market. You know, it's a lot of my investors are out of state, and you know, they're California, Arizona, places like that, where you know the cost of living and the cost of properties are so much higher. You could buy 2, 3 Class B properties for the price that they're paying for one out there, you know, and those are just like gold here, you know. Class B property, it's easy to rent. That's what every family's looking for here. So,
and the Class B property is typically, and we're going to get into some areas, right? So you're going to share your map in a little bit, but just so our listeners know, just kind of give me a general range of Class B property, because you said the price point is a great deal for these people. What is that general price point when people are getting into Class B properties, and what's the general makeup of the property? Is it like a 3-2 built in the 1980s, or like what is the makeup of those properties?
It's going to be between probably 140 and 160,000, and it's going to be your price range. It could be a little more. I wouldn't say a little less. It's going to be a 3-2, generally over 1,100 square feet.
Okay.
Doesn't have to be much more. You're just going to have a 2-car garage. It's going to be built in the 2000s.
Oh, wow.
So,
okay. So relatively newer, like compared to a lot of places, newer properties.
Yeah. And it's good for investors for 2 reasons, because I mean, it's usually in a neighborhood, which is what they're looking for. And then the maintenance is low on a property that's newer. It's just, it
makes their numbers more predictable. It's easier for them to maintain. There's less headache. And like you said, there's always rental demand. Like, are we renting houses quickly in those areas? Like, how quickly do you think?
Yeah, within 30 days.
Yeah.
You know, as long as the price is right, you know, within 30 days, you'll have it rented. And that's in the prime leasing season also, you know, between, I would say March and, you know, October, really.
Yeah. Prime leasing season. Then everything kind of slows down when you kind of get near the holidays, in between Thanksgiving, especially Thanksgiving to New Year's, it slows way down. But no, that's good. That's good to know. So you mentioned these investors that are coming from out of state. They're looking is price point, and they're really looking for cash flow, I would imagine, is what they're trying to do. They're trying to achieve cash flow. And what kind of deals are happening there? So Class B, are they also looking at Class C properties?
Oh yeah, there's people that look at Class C. There's just some other things to take into consideration on those, and that's basically just location. You need to be real careful about where you're buying your Class C property, because there's just some areas that almost make it too hard to rent because of the crime, and you know, that's all location. So usually I have those investors like, let me go ahead and run that property past me. Let me take a look at it, and let's be realistic about what you're going to be looking at for rent. A lot of those will be Section 8. There's plenty of Section 8 opportunity here, and that's going to be where you can maximize your rent from a Class C property.
Yeah, it's the Section 8. So talk a little bit about the Section 8 program. Is it pretty easy to work with?
Well, I mean, it is. I mean, if you've done this as long as I have, you know exactly kind of like, you know, when a tenant brings in a voucher, that's not truly the amount. You know, you have to do a little bit of math there. But yeah, we do a lot of Section 8 tenants. So, and it's just, as long as the owner could be patient with for the first month or two, then everything else will come like clockwork after that.
And so you're able to really help guide investors and say, you know, hey, here are your, I guess just depending on their goals, their objectives. Hey, here are some choices. Here are some areas of town. But I'm guessing some of them come with properties and say, hey, Erin, will you take a look at these properties? Because, you know, I'm thinking about making an offer on this house or this house or this house. That is the great thing about having boots on the ground property managers, is because property managers, they're absolutely aligned with you as an investor from the standpoint of, we want great houses to manage, because houses that are problems are no fun for anybody. You're not going to be happy as an owner or an investor. We're not going to be happy as a property manager. So Erin and anybody else, any other boots on the grounds that we have around the country, they're always going to be thinking and looking out for your best interests. Like, how can we guide and direct? So Erin, I'm guessing, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong, I'm guessing that you even had these conversations with investors where you've been like, hey, listen, this is not a area that you want to invest in, I don't think, just based on kind of your risk tolerance and your goals. Maybe you ought to look over here. So are you actively kind of guiding investors into different parts of areas?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh,
Talk a little bit about
absolutely.
that.
Well, I try to tell them too. Sometimes, like a lot of times when I'm talking to somebody that's looking at a Class C property, I'm not selling you that house. I have to manage it. So I'm going to give you my very honest opinion on how that's going to be to manage, and some things that we can encounter, like vandalism, break-ins and stuff like that. And then I'm going to steer them to better Class C areas that are just, they're just so much better for those properties. There's just some areas that, we just need to kind of steer clear from, because it's just not going to be good for anybody, like you said.
Yeah. And if you're listening to this, we don't have, like, we are getting brokerage in your area. So we will be buying houses for investors very, very soon. So that's coming. So definitely reach out to us if you're interested in us helping you find houses, buy or sell houses. We'd love to do that. Let's talk about, why don't we go ahead and pull up your map, Erin? So you can pull up, you can share your screen, and let's take a look at some of the areas become popular for investors. So toggle over to to that one first. So what we're looking at here really is our rental houses, I guess, all the houses that we're managing in the area, probably from about a year and a half ago. Is that what you told me?
Yeah, it's about a year and a half old. It just kind of shows you where we are here in Little Rock. Now we've expanded a little bit further out since then, into Lone Oak, Hazen, and actually up this way some, so yeah.
But you're looking like a majority of those are right kind of smack dab in the center of Little Rock, and then bleeding down to the southwest area.
Yes, it is. We don't really manage too much in that area anymore.
Okay.
It's almost too far. And then I found that the rents are so low in that area that I wouldn't steer an investor or anybody else that direction, I don't think.
Okay. So let's talk about, I know that you have some thoughts on some ideas that investors, if they are interested in looking at houses, why don't you flip over to the other map and let's talk about these areas that you found really, really interesting.
Okay. Well, I would say that there's probably, I would call it my top 6. And these are the best places to buy houses and rent houses, hands down. And there's different reasons why. So I could go through those as we go through them. So the first city is probably Benton. And you can see Benton is down here.
Can you zoom in a little? Can you zoom in a little bit on that? And if you're listening on the podcast, it is a little bit southwest of town. Benton is.
So it's about 30 minutes outside of Little Rock. And I always tell investors, they're like, well, where should I invest in Little Rock? And I'm like, not in Little Rock. Invest outside of Little Rock. That's where everybody wants to live. They want to live outside and drive into Little Rock to work if they need to.
Is that based on school systems or what?
It's going to be based on school systems, neighborhoods. It's going to be different for each one. There's 3 cities that I was going to tell you about, like Benton and Bryant and Alexander all have really good school systems. So those are why those 3 are my top 3. And they're, it's almost hard to find things there, but whenever you do find something there, you can guarantee it's going to rent.
Let's talk about Benton. So tell me, like, give me the general, like, Class B property. Is this the one that you were telling us about earlier, built in the 2000s, 3-2, kind of like a garden home type house?
Oh yeah. That's you have some that are a little bit older in Benton, but they're still easy to rent as long as they're updated. You can rent in Benton. You can rent anything in Benton.
Okay.
But those are easy as the Class B ones are. Now, as you can see, there's Benton, Bryant, and Alexander. They're all in a row.
Right.
And then you go into
So what
Otter Creek.
interstate is
So
that on? What interstate is that?
it's off Interstate 30.
Okay. So Interstate 30, Benton is the furthest out. And then as you come back towards Arkansas, for those listening on the podcast, you have Bryant and then Alexander. And so all three of those little cities right there, those are your top three. And they all have very similar makeup. Is that what you're telling me as far as bedroom, bath, kind of the type houses that they are?
Well, no, the best ones to invest in would be a 3-2.
Okay.
But the desirability is the highest there in those three.
Okay, gotcha.
Three cities. And then I would say, and they're kind of spread out here. Cabot is another one. Now, Cabot has really good school systems.
Okay, so Cabot is going up. We're northeast of Little Rock. We're going up Interstate. Is that I-67?
It's 167.
Yep, 167. Okay, all the way up there. And so talk to us about it, about Cabot.
Cabot it's like there's like usually just families that live there because of the school systems. It's growing fast. It's kind of expanding. I was going to go into that in just a minute. But Cabot is definitely there's a lot of families there, and the school systems is why people are there. It's also a good place for people to live that are like the Little Rock Air Force Base is right here. So when we were talking about growing up in Jacksonville, Jacksonville's right there. But Jacksonville, you have to be very careful. There are good parts about Jacksonville and bad parts. So the closer you are to the Air Force Base, the better off you are there. But the rent, the rents aren't. I mean, and the crime is less in Jacksonville than it is in other places. So sometimes that is an area of opportunity for investors to look in Jacksonville. Jacksonville is not a bad town. If I had to pick between Jacksonville and Little Rock, I would invest probably in Jacksonville over Little Rock, just because there's not as much crime.
Right.
Sherwood is the other city, and that city is in between Jacksonville and North Little Rock. It is in a community, and I'm going to guess that the reason why most families like living there is because there's a very high police presence there. I mean, you see a lot of police, so there's not a lot of riffraff going on there. So that does draw in a lot of people.
So talk about the investors. You're seeing investors buy in Sherwood?
Oh yeah, if they can find anything in Sherwood, because it rents really well.
Yeah.
Duplexes, smaller houses. Now you wouldn't even have to look at a 3-2 here. You could find a 3-1. You could find other things in Sherwood that you wouldn't look for. There would be Class B. I mean, there'll be Class B, but the'll be
so a little maybe. So when you say 3-1, that kind of indicates to me they're some of them are maybe a little older homes.
Yeah, they are, but it's still easy to rent because of the area.
Okay, awesome.
And then the last one is going to be Conway. Let me back out here. Conway, which is just up Interstate 40 from Little Rock. It's still about 30 minutes from Little Rock. Here in Conway. There are 3 colleges in Conway. There's 3 universities. So it has everything that Little Rock has, minus the crime. So it's also a good place to look for properties, and it has rural areas and rural parts of it too. So,
well, are the because you said there's 3 universities in Conway? Is it like a lot of student housing, or is that what investors are buying there, or is it more still families live in that area?
Still Class B.
Okay.
Class B would be really that, or duplexes. Now, duplexes are really good in Conway. Or multifamily, any kind of multifamily you can find there. And then also just like a Class B property.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. Great to know. So those are your 6 that what you're seeing are like, this is what investors are looking for.
Now there's 6 other areas that investors like everybody that I talk to knows and talks to, if they talk to anybody that knows anything about property management or rental properties, they know that those are probably the top 6.
Right.
What I do know is there's some areas just outside of those bigger cities that you can look for investments in and maybe find some opportunity. And these will be areas too that I feel like we're going to appreciate later.
Okay. All right.
So,
So what you've said, so essentially what I'm hearing, because I don't know hardly anything about Little Rock investment, like the landscape of investment. So the 6 areas you just walked me through, because I just to pretend I'm a new investor to the area, you're saying that those are pretty popular areas. Most people who, have been researching Little Rock know about these areas, right? So you're saying, hey, these are
yes.
areas that people already know about. But if you're brand new, so we have people on the podcast who've never even thought about Little Rock. So if they're just getting educated, those are the 6 areas that are probably most popular. Now you're going to talk to us about 6 other areas that you feel are perfect for investors, for a lot of reasons, but even one of them is we'll see appreciation more than likely in the future.
Yes, I think so. So if we're looking at Conway, and you go directly between Cabot and Conway, Bologna is a, and the reason why this town's got a lot of newer houses that have been built there, and that's basically because there have been a lot of storms that went through there and kind of cleared it out probably about 5 or 10 years ago. So there's a lot of new housing there. It's not far from Conway, it's not far from Cabot, and it's still not that far from Little Rock. So that's an area that we have some houses in, and they're renting very well. So for prices that I would, I was really surprised that we could get some of the rent prices out in Bologna that we have, but they are nicer, newer homes. One of the other areas is Austin and Ward. So these 2 towns are just outside of Cabot. So they're a little bit outside. When I say outside of it, they're 5 minutes away, really.
Okay. Outside of Cabot. Gotcha.
Yeah, Cabot's growing so fast. It's going to be so big. I feel like it's probably just going to kind of engulf Austin and Ward. It'll end up, being all connected like Jacksonville, Sherwood, North Little Rock. It'll be those cities they're connecting.
But you're saying like this is an area, those 2 little places are probably not as picked over by investors yet.
Right. Not yet. And there's a couple more. If you look, here's Little Rock, and if you come out 5:30.
So for those of you listening, she is going south of Little Rock. About how far, Erin?
That's about 30 minutes.
Okay.
I don't know how many miles it is, but it's about 30 minutes.
Yeah, it's called Hensley.
Yeah, Hensley.
Okay.
There's and even Sheridan, and I don't know if you can see Sheridan on here. Here it is, right here. Sheridan is another little place that it's about 30-45 minutes from Little Rock, but there are a lot of people that live there that drive in. There's a lot of newer houses that are out there. I've already got some in Hensley, and I've had some in Sheridan. So and they rent very well. There's not a lot to rent there, so anything that comes up for rent, people jump on it.
Yeah, and what's interesting is when you say 35 minutes away, you're probably talking 30 miles away or 25 miles away. But in some of these cities like Atlanta, 30 minutes could be 5 miles away. 30 minutes is, or Denver or Nashville. It's just gotten so crazy there that so people in these areas and Little Rock's a lot like Birmingham. People have moved out of the city, kind of out of the city center, especially as COVID has allowed people to work from home more and that type of thing, because driving in, even when they drive into the city, is not that big of a deal. It's not like it's crazy traffic going in.
Not at all. I think most people prefer the 30-minute drive to live where they want, to not live in the city.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, yeah. And the other area is Bauxite, and it's right outside of Benton. So I feel like Bauxite is a really good area. I don't know if that many people are looking there, but it's I've already picked up a couple of houses.
What's good about Bauxite?
It's right next to Benton.
Okay.
So Bauxite the kids would go to school in Benton. So and Bauxite's really literally 5 to 10 minutes away from Benton. So if you can't find anything to buy in Benton because it's such a hot spot, then Bauxite might be a good place to look. Or Haskell, which is just below. And those are both really considered, in the Benton, in Saline County.
Well, what I'm hearing from you, Erin, and this is great, is just when I think about this, I'm thinking there's just tons of opportunity